The Cruel Stepmother and the Hidden Kindness. Once upon a time, in a quaint village surrounded by rolling hills and lush forests, there lived a kind and hard-working farmer named Thomas. He lived in a modest farmhouse with his beloved wife, Clara, and their bright, spirited son, Jack. Clara was the light of Thomas's life, and their home was filled with love and laughter. Sadly, Clara fell ill and passed away, leaving Thomas and Jack heartbroken. Years passed, and though the pain of losing Clara never fully faded, Thomas knew he needed to move on for Jack's sake. He eventually met a woman named Margaret. Margaret was beautiful and graceful, with a soft voice that could charm anyone. They soon married, and Margaret moved into Thomas's farmhouse with her 2 children, Alice and Henry. Thomas hoped for a harmonious family, believing Margaret's kindness would help heal their wounds. A new beginning. Initially, Margaret seemed like a blessing. She took charge of the household with ease, and her children quickly adapted to their new home. But as time went on, Margaret's true nature began to reveal itself. She was harsh and demanding, especially towards Jack. While Alice and Henry received the best food, clothes, and toys, Jack was left with the bare minimum. Jack, once full of laughter, began to grow quiet and withdrawn. The daily struggles. Margaret made sure that Jack's life was filled with hardship. While Alice and Henry enjoyed their breakfast of warm porridge and honey, Jack was given a crust of bread. If he complained, Margaret would scold him, saying, "Be grateful you have anything at all." During the day, while Alice and Henry played in the fields, Jack was tasked with cleaning the entire house, tending to the animals, and even fixing broken tools. Margaret would watch him with a cold smile, ensuring he never had a moment's rest. She made sure his chores were endless, and if Jack ever showed signs of fatigue, she would add more tasks to his list. "You must learn the value of hard work," she would say mockingly. Winter's cruelty. One winter, when the first snowflakes began to fall, Margaret decided it was time for new coats for Alice and Henry. She bought the finest wool and had the village tailor make them beautiful, warm coats. Jack, however, was given his mother's old, tattered shawl. "This should be enough for you," Margaret sneered. "You don't need anything fancy." The cold was unbearable. Jack's fingers and toes would go numb as he chopped wood or fetched water from the frozen well. Alice and Henry, wrapped in their warm coats, would taunt him, saying, "Look at Jack, the ice boy. Maybe he'll turn into a snowman." Jack tried to ignore them, but their words stung as much as the cold. Nights of despair. At night, Margaret made Jack sleep in the drafty attic, while Alice and Henry had cozy beds with thick blankets. The attic was cold and lonely, filled with cobwebs and the sound of wind whistling through the gaps in the walls. Jack would shiver under his thin blanket, his stomach growling from hunger, and his heart aching with loneliness. One particularly harsh night, as Jack lay in the attic, he overheard Margaret telling Alice and Henry a bedtime story. "Remember, my darlings, you are special and deserve the best. Jack, on the other hand, must learn his place." Her words echoed in Jack's mind, reinforcing the cruel divide she maintained in the family. Emotional torment. Margaret's cruelty wasn't just physical, it was emotional too. She often belittled Jack in front of her children. "Jack, you're so clumsy," she would say when he stumbled. "Why can't you be more like Henry? He's so much smarter." Alice and Henry, influenced by their mother's attitude, began to mock Jack too. They would hide his belongings, push him into the mud, and laugh at his distress. Jack's heart ached, not just from the physical pain, but from the constant feeling of being unwanted and unloved. Destroying dreams. Margaret's harshness extended to the small joys in life. Jack loved to draw, and would often use scraps of paper and charcoal to create beautiful pictures of the farm and the surrounding nature. One day, Margaret found his drawings and tore them up in front of him. "You're wasting time," she said coldly. "Get back to work." Jack's love for drawing didn't fade, but he learned to hide his sketches, afraid of Margaret's wrath. He would find secret places to draw, like behind the barn or up in a tree, where he could momentarily escape her cruelty and lose himself in his art. A glimmer of hope. Despite the hardships, Jack remained resilient. He found solace in the company of the animals on the farm, particularly an old, wise horse named Whisper. Whisper had been a part of the farm for as long as Jack could remember, and he would often confide in the gentle creature, telling her about his dreams and sorrows. One day, while Jack was cleaning the stable, he overheard a conversation between Margaret and a neighbour. The neighbour praised Margaret for how well she managed the household, but Margaret's response was chilling. "Managing the household is easy when you have a child like Jack to do all the hard work. My Alice and Henry deserve the best, and I ensure they get it." Jack's heart sank. He knew Margaret didn't care for him, but hearing her say it so openly hurt more than any chore ever could. He decided he couldn't stay silent any longer. That evening, when Thomas returned from the fields, Jack mustered the courage to speak up. The confrontation. "Father, I need to talk to you," Jack began, his voice trembling. "Margaret isn't kind to me. She gives Alice and Henry the best of everything and treats me like a servant." Thomas was taken aback. "Jack, are you sure? Margaret has always seemed so caring." Jack nodded, tears welling up in his eyes. "I wouldn't lie to you, Father. Please, come with me and see for yourself." Reluctantly, Thomas agreed. He followed Jack to the kitchen, where Margaret was preparing dinner. As they entered, they saw Margaret serving a lavish meal to Alice and Henry, while Jack's portion was a simple piece of bread. "Margaret," Thomas said, his voice stern, "what is the meaning of this?" Margaret turned, startled. She quickly masked her surprise with a smile. "Oh, Thomas, it's nothing. Jack prefers simpler meals, don't you, Jack?" Jack shook his head. "No, Father. I want to be treated like Alice and Henry." Thomas, now seeing the truth, felt a surge of anger and disappointment. "Margaret, this is unacceptable. Jack is my son and deserves to be treated with love and respect. If you can't do that, then you have no place in this family." Margaret's face flushed with anger. "How dare you speak to me like that, after all I've done for this family?" "Done," Thomas replied, his voice cold. "You've done nothing but sow discord and unhappiness. I will not tolerate it any longer." Realizing she had lost, Margaret grabbed Alice and Henry and left the farmhouse in a huff. Thomas and Jack watched as she disappeared down the road, their hearts heavy but hopeful. New beginnings. With Margaret gone, Thomas and Jack worked hard to rebuild their lives. The farm flourished under their care, and Jack's laughter returned. They welcomed a kind housekeeper who treated Jack like her own, and the farmhouse once again became a place of warmth and love. Years later, Jack grew into a strong and compassionate young man, never forgetting the lessons he learned during those difficult times. He and his father remained close, their bond unbroken by the cruelty they had endured, and while they never saw Margaret again, they both knew they were better off without her harsh presence. In the end, Jack's resilience and Thomas's love triumphed over Margaret's cruelty, proving that kindness and courage can overcome even the harshest challenges. Margaret's downfall. Margaret's departure from Thomas's farmhouse marked the beginning of her decline. She moved back to her small, dilapidated cottage at the edge of the village, struggling to maintain the lifestyle she had become accustomed to while living with Thomas. Without the support of the farm's resources and Thomas's income, Margaret found it challenging to provide for Alice and Henry. As time went on, the villagers began to notice Margaret's harsh treatment of her children. Her once graceful and charming demeanour turned bitter and resentful, driving away the few friends she had left. Alice and Henry, now older and more aware, started to see through their mother's facade. They realized how poorly she had treated Jack and began to question her decisions and authority. Alice and Henry's realization. One day, while playing near the village square, Alice and Henry overheard a group of villagers discussing Jack's resilience and the kindness he showed despite the hardships he faced. They were surprised to hear such praise for their stepbrother and decided to visit Thomas's farmhouse to see for themselves. When they arrived, they found Jack working diligently in the fields, his face brightened by a smile. Thomas greeted them warmly and invited them inside for a meal. The atmosphere in the farmhouse was filled with warmth and laughter, a stark contrast to the tension and coldness they had grown accustomed to with Margaret. During their visit, Alice and Henry apologized to Jack for their past behavior. Jack, ever the kind-hearted soul, forgave them and shared stories of their childhood, reminding them of the good times they once had. Alice and Henry realized how much they missed having a loving family and decided to stay with Thomas and Jack for a while. Margaret's redemption. Meanwhile, Margaret's situation continued to worsen. Her health began to decline, and she found herself isolated and struggling to make ends meet. One cold winter evening, as she lay in her bed, she thought about the choices she had made and the pain she had caused. Regret and guilt weighed heavily on her heart. Determined to make amends, Margaret mustered the strength to visit Thomas's farmhouse. When she arrived, she was greeted by the sight of Alice and Henry playing with Jack, their laughter echoing through the fields. She approached the farmhouse hesitantly, her heart pounding with anxiety. Thomas, seeing the frail and remorseful figure of Margaret, invited her inside. Margaret broke down in tears, apologizing for the pain she had caused and begging for forgiveness. Thomas, though wary, saw the sincerity in her eyes and decided to give her a chance to make things right. A second chance. Margaret moved back into the farmhouse, but this time under different circumstances. She no longer held the authority she once did. Instead, she was determined to prove her change of heart. She worked hard to rebuild the trust she had lost, helping with the household chores and treating Jack with the kindness and respect he deserved. Alice and Henry, seeing their mother's efforts to change, gradually forgave her. Jack, too, extended his forgiveness, his heart still full of the compassion that had carried him through the darkest times. Slowly but surely, the family began to heal. A harmonious family. Years passed, and the farmhouse became a true home once more. Margaret, though still haunted by her past actions, found solace in the love and forgiveness of her family. She spent her days tending to the garden, cooking meals for the family, and sharing stories with Jack, Alice, and Henry. Thomas and Margaret, though their relationship would never be the same as it once was, found a new kind of partnership based on mutual respect and understanding. They worked together to ensure the farm thrived and that their children grew up in a loving and supportive environment. Jack's future. Jack grew into a talented and compassionate young man, his experiences shaping him into someone who understood the value of kindness and resilience. He pursued his love for drawing and eventually became a renowned artist, his works reflecting the beauty and hardship of his life. Jack never forgot the lessons he learned during those difficult times. He often visited schools and orphanages, sharing his story and encouraging children to believe in themselves, no matter the challenges they faced. Margaret's legacy. In her later years, Margaret devoted herself to helping others. She volunteered at the village's orphanage, offering her time and resources to children in need. Though she could never undo the pain she caused, she found a sense of redemption in her efforts to make a positive difference in the lives of others. Margaret's story became a tale of caution and redemption in the village, reminding everyone that it's never too late to change and seek forgiveness. Her journey from cruelty to kindness left a lasting impact on those around her, proving that even the hardest hearts can soften with time and effort. The end. In the end, the farmhouse stood as a symbol of resilience, forgiveness, and the power of love to heal even the deepest wounds. Jack, Thomas, Alice, Henry, and Margaret formed a family that, despite its rocky beginnings, found harmony and happiness in the end.